Strategy Battle gamers around the world, welcome to a GBHL James video where I will be doing a tournament review of the Beacons of Chester event which was held this last weekend. Now this is a prelude event to a new tournament that's going to be added to the Great British Hobbit League roster going into 2017. So I was very keen to get down there and support Gethin Watkins, who's been doing an absolutely sterling job, as so many of you are, creating amazing Hobbit communities in their local areas, beyond and outside of the Great British Hobbit League itself. So this wasn't a Great British Hobbit League counting tournament or event, but Gethin's been putting in a lot of hard work making sure that he's got a really good local gaming group that are all incredibly interested in Lord of the Rings strategy battle game. And I know that he is very excited for his event, which is going to be happening next March. Now, I've always been a big supporter of new events coming onto the scene, new tournaments, new tournament organisers getting involved and putting on some fantastic weekends. And the wonderful thing about this Chester weekend is that, one, it's not a million miles after Ardacon. So it was always going to be a nice break for me to be able to take a little bit of a back seat from sort of the hustle and bustle of all of that and actually just play some games and play some nice relaxed games. And also the last times that I've been to tournaments have been incredibly competitive. Going over to Nova, of course, wonderful experience, played against some great people, but it's a competitive event, and same with Longbottom Carnival just before that. So Chester really appealed to me because it also kind of coincided within a week of two other events in the Great British Hobbit League, one of which was counting for the actual league points themselves, and another one which wasn't. There was the fireworks at Rivenstead, which was down in East Grinstead, run by Mid Sussex Wargamers and Sam Page in particular, which quite a few people went down to. That looked like that was great fun. I think it was a doubles event. I don't know too much about that, but I think it was a doubles event. Oh no, it wasn't a doubles event, sorry. I'm getting confused because GBHL Damien and GBHL Tom had this wonderful kind of Bolg versus Azog thing, but that was actually in separate games. They weren't playing together. And then there was also the event up at JT's in Huddersfield. I know that he's working with Lewis Applin a little bit more for Old Toby Wargaming, and they ran an event up there. So as such, a lot of the kind of more established crowd who sort of travel to attend these various events had already gone to those, and I thought, well, that's probably going to mean that there's going to be less of the established crowd who are going to be going to support this kind of brand new tournament. And ultimately Chester, I mean, it's great to have another event in the northwest. That means that we've got Preston, it means that we've got Desolation of Stockport, of course it means now that we've got Ardacon on our doorstep. We've also got the Scouring of Cheshire, which is in Altrincham, and now also the Beacons of Cheshire event, which I'm sure is going to be a very successful event, and I will explain why in this tournament review. Now this tournament review isn't going to be a huge amount of time because the format of this tournament was one of my favourites. I'm a big fan, completely selfishly, of one-day tournament events, of course, because, you know, I'm married, I have a business, I have lots of things going on, and it's much easier to kind of explain, you know, going away and doing a day of something rather than it taking up a whole weekend. So the fact that Chester's only 45 minutes away, the fact that it was a new event that was, you know, unlikely because of where it fell in to have anybody kind of from the Great British, or many people from the Great British Hobbit League kind of heading in towards that, you know, so I wanted to go there to support that, and also to meet some new people as well, because Gethin's done a fantastic job in building a local scene and people who haven't necessarily travelled out to various tournaments, although there was a few there that was nice to catch up with. But also the fact that this was a one-day event really kind of appealed to me. I thought, I can do that. And it also coincided really well with the fact that it was Jane's baby shower, which meant that I hadn't been sort of roped in for any husband-like duties, and really we've been avoiding the house because the boiler's broken. So yeah, so the rules pack itself went on to the Chester Hobbit League. If you do live in the northwest, and I do recommend that you get yourself onto the Chester Hobbit League Facebook page, because Gethin manages that, and that's where he puts a lot of his local gatherings, and a lot of those aren't league counting, but not everything is about getting league points for the Great British Hobbit League. Sometimes it's about meeting cool people and just getting to play with the armies that you love. And I kind of had a feeling that this was going to be that kind of event, that you were going to get lots of people bringing cool armies that you probably wouldn't see, particularly in sort of the top half of tables at an event where you've got scores that are counting, or a big event like Ardacon and the like, and there's lots of people who are trying to win or do well for their teams. So that was a big appeal for me. It was also a massive appeal because, of course, when I've been going to these various events, I've been taking Rivendell Knights, which are a very competitive army, and I thought, well, this kind of allows me to go back to my absolute love, which is, of course, the all-mounted Rohan. And luckily in the rules pack, it worked out at a perfect points level for all-mounted Rohan, which is 500 points. So of course anybody who is a channel history buff will know that the Get Buff Bat Reps were always 500 points, and when the Great British Hobbit League started, there were a lot of 500 points tournaments and events. Now that's kind of slowed down now. A lot of tournaments are going upwards of 600 points now, so I think the average is probably more towards 600 because there's the odd 350, 400 point tournament, but 500 points as a mid-range has kind of disappeared off of the calendar and schedule, which is a shame for the all-mounted Rohan. But so it was wonderful to see that I already had a decent 500 point force. So the rules pack, because it was a single day, was going to be 4 games at 500 points. The scenarios were a modified version of Hold Ground. You then had Lords of Battle, you had a modified version of Seize the Prize, and then you had Domination. So a reasonable balance of scenarios, which I'll go through when talking about this review. The games, I think, lasted about an hour and 45 minutes, I think, with decent breaks in between. We had a lunch break where we could head down into Chester, and let's talk about that first of all. I mean, for anybody who's looking to travel to this type of event, Chester is it's a historic location. There's tons of history. It's a beautiful place to visit, let alone somewhere to come and do strategy battle gaming. And the location, I mean, I was very chuffed because it was Sunday, so therefore I didn't have to pay for any parking, just parked up on the street, which is brilliant, and it is just outside of the entrance into sort of the main city / town of Chester. It was just on the opposite side of the road, in a wonderful building. I think it was called Spencer's Palace. I think that's what it's called. It's kind of like an old Tudoresque building with lots of sort of wooden beams and dark wooden floors and furniture, and had a real kind of sort of feeling of antiquity, that kind of feel to it. Very historic style of building. So a really nice location actually. And I know that the guys in Chester hold a gaming group there, sort of every single week, playing different systems, but they do the gaming group there. So if you are in the northwest, Chester's really easy to get to, whether you're kind of North Wales based, incredibly quick to get to, and even if you're just going down sort of the M5 and the like, that's quite easy to get to. Manchester, you've got the 56, and of course to get onto the 56 anywhere going up and down that M6 makes it really easy to get to Chester. So as a location, absolutely fantastic place to hold a tournament. And plenty of car parking as well, and relatively cheap car parking close, because you've got the race course. It's right by the race course, Chester race course. So nobody should ever have any problems with parking, even if they do a weekend event. It's not going to come to a fortune, which is obviously great. So went in there, and what was wonderful is there were a couple of faces that I recognised. It was good to see Liam Friel. I very much feel as someone who's kind of mainly been going to or at events when I've been running events, so Desolation of Stockport or of course Ardacon, although everyone's there, you just can't catch up with people because you're so busy. And so it was really nice to be able to catch up with the likes of Liam Friel, who very kindly brought along a Theodred foot mounted to add for my Rohan collection, which I bought off of him, which was great. And I also recognised a couple of other guys there. There was Alan Thomas Hughes, who came to Ardacon. There were a couple of Ardacon attendees there, and of course we know Gethin. Joe Wilcock was there, who's a very good player, very strong player, and he's part of the Chester group. And he always does pretty well at tournaments as well, and he did smash me in the game that we played back in Huddersfield, an escalation tournament in Huddersfield, probably at the start of last year maybe, so quite a while ago. So he's a very good player. But what was mainly wonderful for me was there are a ton of faces that I have never seen at a Great British Hobbit League event. So what's going to be wonderful is having an event in Chester isn't just going to bring people to Chester from the Great British Hobbit League, but it's also going to bring that wonderful gaming group who are all lovely people from Chester to maybe you know, travel down the M56 to come to Altrincham, to come to Stockport, to come to Ardacon, Manchester, to maybe go up the M6 and go to Preston and the like, you know, which was great. And even to go down the M5, I think it's the M5, going towards Cardiff. So that was, you know, that was absolutely brilliant. And it was certainly the highlight of the day for me, was meeting all of these wonderful new people. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down and review the game. So game 1 kicked off from 9:30. There was a registration for 30 minutes. It was really nice. You know, there was, I believe that there were 13. There were I think there were 13 players in total, because Gethin had to step in. So for a non-GBHL sort of event and tournament, as it were, that's pretty good. There are GBHL counting events which, you know, haven't reached those levels, or haven't been to that level before. So that's a really good solid start, considering you only had a handful of people who were travelling, you know, a bit further afield. And I would probably include myself in that, even though it's only a 45-minute drive down the M56. So as such, there was a nice array of tables. You had kind of a 3 foot by 6 foot a kind of trestle table, you know, the kind of things that you see when you're in a lunch hall of some kind, or a canteen, and then across those, obviously made by their gaming group, and the kind of things we see like at Altrincham Wargamers, you had 2x4 kind of green boards, and a lot of these actually had like a battle map placed over them. Some of them didn't, they had a battle map placed over them, and then a nice variety of terrain as well. You know, there wasn't a huge amount of terrain, but there was enough there, and some of that terrain was really themed. So good job there, especially as this is a local group getting started as well. So I like that. I like the fact that there was that variety. And in game 1, I got drawn against a lovely chap called Rhys Cooper. So this is somebody never played before, and I've not met a Great British Hobbit League event either, which is always wonderful if you get into that opportunity. And Rhys Cooper had brought an Easterlings army. Now, we were playing a modified hold ground, and modified hold ground was one of the negatives of hold ground, of course, is if you win the initial priority, you are giving your opponent a huge advantage. So what I did instead was something a little bit different from the Maelstrom battle deployment, and a bit more like what I did at the league final at Stockport a couple of years ago, where you alternate, you alternate, and I think that's if you're going to modify hold ground, I think that's a great way to do it. That actually you do it as a deployment. It's, well, a walk-on, but almost like it's a deployment where you alternate first of all, and once all the war bands are on, then you continue, just like with Maelstrom, and go into your first turn, which was a really good idea. So I looked across at the army in front of me. Now, another thing about the Chester Gaming Group, because it's not a league counting event, you had a lot of guys there who were experimenting with armies as well. And that's something that we don't really see in the tournament scene, and for good reason. Everybody loves playing against wonderfully painted armies, and there were some at this event. But what was also good to see as well was that because it's a local group, there were people who were trying things out. You know, they were trying new models. They you know, glued together some models, and there was a bit of bare metal there, and there was some just primed models around, you know, scattered around. Don't have a problem with that kind of event at all, because, you know, it's an opportunity for people, local people in particular, to play with their toys and work out, you know, what kind of armies they want to bring going forwards, and learn what kind of player they are. And Rhys had a few of those in there, and he had pretty much a pure Easterling army, so 500 points. He had Amdur, so, you know, quite expensive, but Amdur on foot, you can obviously do a good deal. He had 2 Easterling captains, again on foot, and then really just a bunch of Eastlings. Now, any of the pikemen that he had, mostly sword and shield he had, but he had a scattering of pikemen. The pikemen had the Black Dragon upgrade, so fight 4, courage 4. And he also had a handful of bowmen as well. It was reasonably balanced. It was just kind of, well, it wasn't exactly a third, it was just like what you get in a plastic box. So this guy was just using the toys that you get in the plastic boxes, which was cool. And he also decided to try something a little bit different, and brought along Kardush and a handful of orcs, just to give that fireball. No intention, of course, doing fury, because it's not an orc army, there's no point, but what he wanted to use that for was to blow stuff up with that fireball. And so we started the game, and I rolled first of all for Aeol the Young to come on. which failed, I believe. I think that failed. Oh no, sorry, I rolled for Eowyn to come on, and that failed, which meant that he then went next, and he was getting to choose. So I rolled a 1, Eowyn didn't come on, went back over to him, and he brought Amder on. He got to place it where he wanted, and he started and he was kind of good with those rolls. He managed to do that with Amder. When it came back to him again, he did it with Kardush. Kardush went quite close. When he next rolled, he had one coming in from the centre. And I was a bit more unlucky. So he was choosing. I chose not to use might, and he put me in nice sort of in far positions. So, I got to choose Erkenbrand's Warband. On one side, which I put in the middle with a nice clear route sort of towards the middle. He got to choose Eorl the Young's, which he put as far away from Erkenbrand as he could. So let's talk a little bit about what my army was up against this Eastling horde. So at 500 points, when I first started Strategy Battle Game, my 500 point Rohan army was Eorl the Young, Eowyn and Erkenbrand. Eorl the Young, at his points, is of course a lot better than Eomer and other options. He's got a lot more going for him. So you kind of, you kind of try and get around that theme a little bit and say, well, he's Elfhelm, there's no Elfhelm profile, but we know that he's in there because he does a job better really for his points as well as that. And it also, one of the reasons I wanted to include him in this one was because it gave me an opportunity to do a bit of a repaint with him. He's one of the models that I painted that I was the most disappointed with the paint job that I did with him, which was good. So I actually brought him into the fold. Now, back when I originally did my 500 point list, I would take, I think it was three or four, I think it was like 3 Sons of Ale, 3 or 4 Sons of Ale, 4 Royal Guard, 4 Outriders, I think it was 4, 4 and 4, and then I would have about 6 Westfold Red Shields in total. I think that was my 500 point army. And after Preston and Mansfield, I changed that because at the time I was a relatively new player, and as a new player I found having a leader that was 2 fate, 2 wounds, not particularly forgiving, and 2 attacks as well when he got countercharged, and lost faith in Eorl or that kind of hero pretty quickly. So you would have seen the evolution of that army when if anybody's used to watch the channel in the early days, my Get Buff Batrep army, I actually replaced Eorl and Eowyn out and brought in the Knight of the Pelennor. And one of the reasons for that is that Knight of the Pelennor is of course a big hero at 500 point. He's got all the 3s in all the right places, and having a profile like that is a lot more forgiving in lots of ways. But I am a bit more experienced with the game now. Let's face it, I know I still make a lot of mistakes, but I have been playing the game a while and I am a better player than I was then. I've learnt a lot more, and I've learnt how important might is, and that is something, especially in this force, especially in a cavalry army which is going to rely a lot on the roll-offs, and with the Fight 5 needing to be able to heroic strike at times, and making sure that you get successful heroic combats when you first get your charges off. So I kind of learned that might was quite important, and it gave me that incentive as well to do a bit of a repaint on Eorl. And that was my thinking behind that. But that meant that my whole army composition changed as well. I've dropped the Royal Guard because Erkenbrand gives the +2 courage to everybody, so you don't really need bodyguard. You can kind of, yes, if you come up against raids, so you've got -1, but still your Sons of Ale will go up to courage 5 in that situation, or 6 if not, and everything else is going to courage 5, so they become as courageous, or if not more courageous than elves with Erkenbrand around. So you don't necessarily need the Royal Guard, and Sons of Ale are much better, of course. So I actually went for 6 Sons of Ale, and dropped an Outrider to be able to do that as well, and had 3 Outriders. Now I still like having the Outriders, and it's not just because, Fight 3 is a big weakness, it is a big weakness, but it's more to do with the ability to sit on an objective and reliably not necessarily run away in your kind of domination games and the like, or even you know, even hold ground and stuff like that to a degree. So, you know, I still like having the outriders and the option to have the 3+ shoot value, but 3+ shoot in with a strength 2 bow isn't going to do a huge amount anyway. And again, it gave me an opportunity to get those outriders a bit of an update and a bit of a paint job. And then I actually I upped the number of just basic Westfold red shields that I took to 10. So all of a sudden you're kind of exploiting the strengths of the 100% bow limit a little bit more. Now, you would think in theory that this would make this army more skirmishy, but as I've learned from playing Rivendell Knights, it's not just the skirmishing which is it's the threat of being able to do that forces your opponent to do certain things, which enable you to then do your game plan, and you'll probably see a little bit of that as I talk through my various games. So that was that, and yeah, the warbands were pretty balanced as well. I spread it out, and I'll explain to you why I did that as well. So Ale the Young took 3 Sons of Ale and 3 Westfold Red Shields, so a bit of balance. So immediately you know that is probably going to be a unit that's going to be getting stuck in. It is one of the things with a Rohan army. If you take a pure Rohan army, the heroes that are likely to be your leader are also the ones that you're probably going to be wanting to get into combat. So that can hinder you. That can hinder you in terms of losing VPs because of your leader getting killed in that instance. But at the same time, you look at that warband and you know that whilst it's got the sort of the 3 bows in it, so you've got the options to do that, really it's a hitting force to a degree, isn't it? Then you, at the opposite end of the scale, you then had Erkenbrand. Now, if anybody's looking at that Rohan army, your target priorities are of course going to be Ale the Young, because of the potential to get the 3-point of might every time, but also Erkenbrand with a +2 courage. So Erkenbrand was a little bit more of a reserved warband actually. I actually put the 3 outriders and 3 Westfold red shields with him. So not necessarily, or you wouldn't look at it and think not necessarily the warband that you're going to be committing, as it were, and a weaker warband in some instances, which could draw somebody more towards that than Ale could do. And then Eowyn pretty much had the same warband as Ale, 3 Sons of Ale, but 4 Westfold Red Shields. The extra Westfold Red Shield to make up for the fact that she's got 1 less attack, and just to beef out her warband a little bit, so that her warband doesn't become kind of an easy target. It's got something a bit more about it. And you've got a nice bit of balance then as well, in terms of breaking. You know, if people are going to focus on Ale the Young and Erkenbrand, you've also got, you know, the biggest contingent of your force isn't the target priority, which means it's easier to avoid getting broken. So that was some of the ideas. A bit of thought has gone into it, you know, to try and play it and do well with it. Because I've always said that I would love to take all mounted Rohan to a tournament victory, and that seems to be sliding away as a possibility over the years, with the reduction in the number of 500-point tournaments, where it's a nice sweet spot. You can just about get the things that you need in there without coming up against too many of the things which can hinder you. Whereas if you go lower points, you can't really get enough, and if you go higher points, you come up against too much, which will smash you into the ground, and you don't have much of a counter. So that was the idea behind that. So that's how we deployed, and that's where we kind of came out. And with hold ground, I learned reasonably early on in playing SBG that with that cavalry army, really you've got to kind of fight over the objective. You've got to get over it and kind of pin your opponent back, you know, because even if they smash you, you've then still got things on the objective, and you can give it a good go. But one thing that he did do, he did take the bait of seeing Erkenbrand and his weaker warband. So instead of deploying everything in the corner, he deployed 2 warbands in a corner behind a house and a field, 1 slightly more to the centre, not fully to the centre, still around that house. So he kind of had a corner of the board, and then he deployed 1 out up on towards a hill, sort of facing into the flank of Erkenbrands, who were coming in from the kind of the adjacent board edge, as it were, the board edge next to it. And his idea behind that was to try and lure Erkenbrand away and try and sort of split my army. Now, as a cavalry army, you do want to split your army, to a degree to outmaneuver your opponent. I do it in every game that I do, but ultimately only to put yourself in a situation to isolate other parts of your enemy line or warbands that are separate. And we started the game, and Ael the Young and his warband immediately started making towards Amda's warband and Kardush's warband in that corner, or at least getting into threat range, because you've got the leader kill there potentially, and it's a good size of his army that's still kind of isolated. And I'm also confident that even if that turned into a bit of an attrition war, by the time it turns into an attrition war, so after the charge, the turn after, even if you lose the roll off the turn after, by the turn after that, I'm going to be able to get help over there regardless. So whether that's Erkenbrand or Eowyn. Eowyn came on turn 2, and she came on the... he chose nice and far away again from his army, so he chose the farboard edge from where he deployed. And pretty much Erkenbrand's warband ignored the spare warband that he put out. Eowyn's warband started charging up towards the middle to kind of congregate with Erkenbrand, and do a little bit of shooting at the stuff of his that was sort of coming towards the middle. But all of the action really took place as he brought Amda's warband and Kardush's warband forward, and of course with Ael the Young and the Sons of Ael, as soon as I could, when he got priority, which was pretty much, I think that this would have been on the 3rd turn, so he moved up, he had priority, I charged in with Ael and a Son of Ael on one combat, so of course setting up the heroic combat, another Son of Ael and another Son of Ael going in elsewhere, and then use that heroic combat to really maximise the impact of that first charge, and managed to kill about 5 Easterlings, which was a substantial amount, considering I think he broke on something like 17 or 18 dead or something like that. I think it might have been 17 dead. So yeah, that was already that was pretty good. And the game proceeded to be a case of, well, hang on a minute, I was ignoring one of his warbands. He kept the archers that he had kind of set back trying to shoot at my stuff, but of course I did have superior bowfire as I moved into that centre, and he had to move his infantry up in towards me, which then subjected him to the counter, and in the end it was an emphatic victory to the Rohirrim. The lack of fight for on the part of the Easterlings, and the fact that they didn't have any cavalry, but more importantly the fact that his force was so spread out that I could really kind of isolate chunks of it. And Ael the Young did a sterling job against Amda's warband, killed Kardush and a bunch of orcs very, 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 very quickly, and it didn't take too long to get that down. And then unfortunately for my opponent, the game carried on. We didn't roll a 1 or a 2, it carried on until I had tabled him. So that was a pretty emphatic victory to the Rohirrim to start off, and I think, I don't have the scores haven't been put up, but in the end that was a 26-0 victory, so a really good, strong, solid start. Now what I should mention at this point before I talk about game 2 is the type of armies that were there. One of the wonderful things about this being a non-GBHL counting event and made up predominantly of local gamers who just want to get their toys out and get their favourite stuff out, was that there were some cool armies. So not only did I play against that mostly Easterling infantry force, but you also had, there was a Mummock there, which was cool. There was a very low might kind of Angmar kind of hybrid army, I suppose, that didn't have a lot of might, so it wasn't too awful, even though there was a shade there. You had Joe Wilcock bring in Radagast on Sleigh, Gwahir and 2 Eagles. You had a couple of really, really gorgeous looking Gondor armies. There was a Fimble, Narzog, Hunter Orc army there. You had an Orc horde with just captains there, which was pretty amazing to see. There was a Vault Warden army. There was a Grimhammer army. There were Wood Elves with Gimli and Legolas there. There was a Fellowship there. So that gives you a little bit of a handful of some of the forces that we saw there, and that was really, really cool. So after game 1, we went straight into game 2, and having won my first game, I played against Ben Haskell. Ben Haskell, the son of Michael Haskell, of course, came to Ardacon, which was brilliant. So it's nice to see him there. And Ben had brought an Orc horde, and I was just I was like flabbergasted. I thought that this was incredible, amazing. It was a little bit of a throwback to the first Nova tournament we went to, where there were so many armies where you just saw loads of captains, a couple of shamans, although he didn't have shamans in there at all. Just loads of captains, no named heroes necessarily, or maybe one, and then just chaff. And that was a chaff army. And I looked at it and thought, wow, if I'd have played that at Hold Ground, that would have been really tough. And that was the first thing I thought. I thought, he outnumbers me 2 to 1 at least. So I think he had something like 4 or 5 warbands of orcs. There were a couple of Morannons dotted in there, but it was mostly just orcs with shield, and a backup of orcs with spear. And we were playing at Lords of Battle, so immediately there was a scenario advantage to myself. We played on a board where there wasn't too much sort of going on terrain wise. There was kind of like a forest in the middle, but it wasn't woodland terrain. It was just lots of scattered trees that kind of dominated kind of middle right flank of mine, and then there was the odd little hedge, mostly I have to say sort of towards my side, and then going up the left flank slightly. And this was a Citadel Realm of Battle board. So you had kind of like the hills on the outside. So with it being Lords of Battle, he of course immediately set up where he could. Well, he did just across the board, all the way across 2 ranks, all the way across in the centre of the board. So I knew that there wasn't going to be, you know, an opportunity here to sort of do a kind of fullback shoot, fullback shoot, fullback shoot. Not really for too long anyway, and not without making myself more vulnerable. So I had a situation where, luckily, as he did advance, I put my Erkenbrand, managed to roll for him to go anywhere. I put Erkenbrand and the Outriders and Westfold Red Shields up on a hill over on my left flank, sort of looking down. I had Erkenbrand and a strongish force in the middle, and then I had Ale. And I deployed Erkenbrand to be the centre of that left flank. So he wasn't on the left flank. He was actually closer to the centre. And then these guys were up on the hill next to him within 6 inches. Then I actually had Eowyn in the middle with her strongish warband. Not too close, but she had to deploy at the 12-inch point, I think. So she started just less than 12 inches away. And then Eorl the Young, he deployed kind of just to the right of Eowyn's warband. Again, he stayed reasonably central, and there were a couple of riders that stayed behind the barrier. And one thing that I was looking at here was that when the game started, that he would have to do that advance, and there was 2 things that were going to happen. His centre was going to end up being strongest just by definition of just by the way that the terrain was, because that centre line could just come through pretty much unopposed. But on the right hand side, that battle line would have to kind of be pulled apart a little bit because of the trees. He was always going to have to chase the game because I had bows, but you know, his left flanks and my right flank, his battle line would start interspersing. Then there was a hedge there where my guys were, so I could see a bit of an opportunity there. And then over on the left flank, again, there was a couple of the hedges, so I knew that that would slow up his orcs as they were coming up there. So the main threat was going to be always in the centre, and my goal really was to try and lull him into that centre and then envelop and go around the outside. So kind of really bring that drive on, and then rely on the Sons of Eorl and the heroes to really do so much killing that he wouldn't be able to come back from that. And it went pretty much like that. He came down through the middle. I did some bow fire, all of my bow fire firing at his orc spearmen. His left flank, so over on my right, started to break up. This was just in the first turn of movement, by the way, and then sort of he got priority on that next turn, which of course you don't want, so that was lucky for me. And as he advanced, I then countercharged in on that right flank and deployed my resources from the centre to swing around onto that right flank of his. And again, a couple of heroic combats from Eorl the Young. All of a sudden his left flank was being chopped and eaten into, and in the meantime in the centre, just kind of pulling back a little bit, and using the riders that I had there and the outriders and riders on the left flank just to keep shooting down at those spear supports and just kind of focusing on that. But as his flank crumbled, he still sensed the opportunity to sort of trap me in the middle, and probably got a bit of a jump on me. And although I was aiming to kind of swing round, I realised that if I swung my left and centre round to the right, that he would probably cut off my centre, and that could be pretty grim. So actually, I end up keeping my left where it was, and sort of consolidating that, and bringing all of my centre round to the right and coming down through his left flank, which worked pretty well. And as a result, I was just sort of chipping away and getting a bunch of VPs, whilst he closed in, and he did trap what was going on over there. But luckily for me, all of the fight for was really handy, and the fact that I'd left a channel behind my front rank of sort of outriders and the like meant that the riders behind could get round and they could do a counter charge. And I had sent a solitary Son of Ale early on in the game right into that corner, so that when inevitably it did charge, I would have something pretty powerful that could go in there and reliably kill sort of 2 or even 3 orcs per go. So that's kind of how it went. Erkenbrand ended up getting pretty trapped, but was able to hold off even though he was on a horse. He used his might to just keep winning his fights, even when he didn't roll, even when he had so many up against him. And in the meantime, Ale and his riders just crumbled through, completely destroyed his left flank, managed to get in onto the centre before sort of time was called, and the game ended. And that was a pretty big victory in the end for me, just purely because of the nature of the forces. I had lost three troops. I think I lost a Son of Ale and 2 riders, which gave away. I don't know. I think I lost a Son of Ale and an outrider and 2 riders, which gave away 8 VPs. And I think one of my heroes also lost a point of fate. I think that might have been Eowyn. Could have been Eowyn. I think maybe Eowyn or Erkenbrand. I think it was one of them, possibly Erkenbrand, considering the situation he was in. But again, another great opponent. Really enjoyed playing against Reese and Ben as well. Played in a really good spirit. Wonderful to see an army like that, and really was killed by the scenario and the ability of Ale and the Sons of Ale, backed up by those Westfold Red Shields, who could then do any counter charges they need to do to get in. I also must point out as well, Ale the Young did better than average with his free might in all of the games across the board. I think in one he managed to avoid paying for it three or 4 times. If you can get that in the first couple, then you're doing absolutely superb, because you're getting so many more opportunities to use might. But he averaged more than 2, and really you want kind of sort of, if you get 2 in one game and 1 in another game, it balances out. That's what it kind of should be. But he did really, really well. So I was very chuffed with his performance, and having the extra might was really paying off. The ability and using it as well, and being pretty liberal with it, to either heroic combat, and even just to make sure that you kill stuff through that, and also the heroic moves, of course, as well. So unfortunately, that knocked down Ben Haskell. But he actually went on to come second in the tournament with that Orc Horde. So it just shows you, chaff can do very, very, very well, very well. So having been on 2 wins, we then went and got some lunch. I just nipped into town, went to Sainsbury's, got myself some lunch, headed back, walked past the Games Workshop on the way there, saw Michael Haskell's beautiful Smaug. I know that the Games Workshop in Chester are big supporters of the Hobbit hobby, so again, if you are around in that area, make sure you head down there and get some games in. And again, this was a 2-3 minute walk from Stanley Palace, where we were playing the game, so that was brilliant. Had lunch, had a wonderful catch up with people. That was really nice, chatting to Liam Friel, Joe Wilcock, really talking about and Dave McShearer as well, who was there. and talking about some of the changes that we're looking to do for Ardacon next year, which was exciting. So then we actually went into Game 3. And Game 3 was a modified version of Seize the Prize. Now, what Gethin had done, we all know that Seize the Prize isn't a particularly balanced scenario for competitive play. And the reason for that is that unless somebody is very, very unlucky with the digging up of the prizes, certain forces can pretty much guarantee auto wins in some senses. So, you know, fell beasts with the Shelob or something along those lines, or eagles. Eagles are fantastic at that. You know, they're always going to have a huge advantage. But it had been modified, and modifying Seize the Prize makes it better. In the past, modifications have been things to, you know, introduce breaking and the like, and not having it so that the game ends. So if you introduce breaking, not having it so that the game ends when it goes off the board, that gives somebody a bit of an opportunity to either get more VPs or for somebody to bring it back to a draw if you do 3 and 5 for the like. So yeah, that was but that's not how Gethin had modified it. So Gethin introduced having 2 artifacts. There were 2 side by side in the middle, and the game still ended when both artifacts were taken up, but you got 3 for each artifact you took off your opponent's board edge. Now, taking prizes off your opponent's board edge in Seize the Prize is an important change. So if anybody wants to do Seize the Prize, having that as a change is a good thing. And I understood what he was doing, having 2 of those as well, because then, you know, you've got 2 50-50 rolls to try and get those prizes up in the first place. But what he also had as well, to stop people from taking the prize and then just sitting back for the win and taking it into their own board half, if you had the prize and you had it in your own board half at the end of the game, you got -1 VP. Rather than +1 for having it, whereas you got +1 if you had one on your opponent's board half. So even if you had 1 on your opponent's board half and you had 1 on your half, you'd have 0 VPs and you'd end up with a 0-0 draw. So there's no leader, no breaking, and the game did end when both artifacts were off. And I was drawn against a very lovely chap called Josh Lanning, and he had a Hunter Orc army. And a very good Hunter Orc army. So at 500 points, I think Hunter Orcs are a fantastic shout. He had Fimbul on Warg, who is very good, fight 5, the ability to go through forests and woodland without penalty, or charge through them. Didn't come into play in this because we were playing on a board that had 4 kind of big Osgiliath ruin things in there. But he had Fimbul, he had Narzug. Narzug was on a Warg as well, and then he also had a Hunter Orc captain with a 2-handed weapon, and then just Hunter Orcs across the board. I think he had a banner in with his Hunter Orc captain. He probably had a smattering of about 4 2-handed weapons, and he made good use of his third bow limit. So he did take a 3rd Orc bows. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, right, okay, so I clearly have an advantage in this scenario, and my advantage is of course my mobility. I'm going to get to those prizes first, and if I can dig them up, I've got a big advantage. And Josh clearly saw this and kind of deployed accordingly. So I think he deployed first, and he deployed his captain in the middle with his banner. So of course then I counter deployed. Sorry about that. So I then counter deployed a warband in the centre, and I put, who did I put in the centre? I believe I started off and I put Eowyn. I think I put Eowyn's warband in the centre. And then, clearly worried about the idea of the prize getting taken around his flanks, he then proceeded to deploy Fimbul on his right flank, so my left flank, and Fimbul's warband went over there. So I was like, right, okay. So bearing in mind Fimble was his leader as well, so you know I understand what he's doing. I know leader doesn't come into this, and I know why you wouldn't deploy your strongest heroes first, because he deployed his Hunter Orc Captain in the middle. That then meant that he had to deploy Narzug and Fimble elsewhere. Well, not necessarily elsewhere, but so he then put Fimble over on the right flank with his Hunter Orcs, and then I counter deployed and I put Ael the Young in the centre. So then of course he's looking at it, and you don't want to leave a gateway now on the other flank, so he's deployed Narzug on that flank. So I've just thought, right, you've just got to get right through this middle, and you just pulverise the middle before the flanks can come round, and use your heroes and your big hitting troops to do that. So I then also deployed Erkenbrand in the middle, and of course heroic marched. First turn I managed to get my, so I heroic marched first turn, he also heroic marched in the centre, which was fine, so he could get close to the prize but not close enough, so he was about 3 inches from the prize, but I had priority and I did it, and I moved Ael the Young and Erkenbrand over the prizes, and then I moved 2 riders in base contact with Ael the Young and the prize, dismounted them so they're in base contact with both, and was very, very lucky and managed to dig up the prize there and then, and of course that meant that they could get past to my heroes very, very, very quickly, and then just pretty much got all of my big hit, it meant that all 6 of my Sons of Ael could sort of go up that middle bit pretty quickly. Because of the gap between the ruins, I couldn't bring everything to bear, which meant that I then had kind of like a reserve, and my reserve was made up of a lot of my riders, not all of them, but a lot of my riders and outriders that were kind of set up about 12 inches from the centre of the board, and they then had lanes, shooting lanes on the 2 flanks, because in the next turn of course he had to heroic march to try and get in on me. And a couple of heroic combats, using the dismounted troops to plug the gaps in the ruins for when he was coming across, whilst I kind of heroic combated, and really just put all of my heroes, Eowyn, Ael, and Eowyn plus 3 Sons of Ael, I think was the only number that come to bear in those ruins, but it meant that I could really just power through and smash through that middle. And then I did do a particularly clever heroic combat when he had brought Fimble and Narzug to come in to try and catch Erkenbrand, who'd heroic combated away and got pretty far, and Ael, who'd now heroic combated, so both were in range of getting off the board edge. He'd brought Narzug round the back of a ruin to try and catch them, so that was going to come to a heroic move off, but he'd also brought Fimble as well into that position. So what I'd done was I got Eowyn and a Son of Ael to charge in on him, and when they backed away, of course, they were then blocking him. They managed to kill his warg as well. So it was going to come down to that roll-off. The roll-off went to me, which meant that Erkenbrand and Ael could get off the board, and that led to an 8-0 victory to me, because instead of punishing your opponent because it was on his board half by giving -2, it was actually that I then got the 2. So wow, so it was a great game. Josh was lovely, really, really nice guy. Looking forward to meeting him. All of these guys I've added on my Facebook and stuff straight away, because they're all really lovely, great people to play against, and I would be quite willing to sort of head down to Chester just for some casual games any time. I really, really would. So that meant I was looking round, and there was one game that had finished very, very, very early, and that was Joe Wilcock versus Dave Shearer. And of course the Eagles had managed to, I think they'd managed to get one prize, one off. They managed to get one artifact off to get 3 VPs, I believe, and then he had a prize, but he had it in his own board half, or something along those lines anyway. So I think it ended up as being a 2-1 victory. I can't work out how it was, but that game had been over for a while. Josh was looking over, there were tables next to me, sorry, Joe was looking over, and Joe's army, I mean, Joe straight away, I was looking around and thinking, everybody else for me is a bit of an unknown quantity. I've not met any of these guys really. There was a few that I had met, but Joe is someone that I know is a very, very good player. He's played against some of the top guys, he has victories against some of them, he has draws against some of them, and he's smashed me the last time that we played, and he actually smashed my Rohan army. So we were the only two guys going into the final game, game 4, on 3 victories. 3 victories. I was very, very far ahead on VPs because of how well I did a hold ground on Lords of Battle. And the final game was going to be domination, which would probably suit me because he's got Radagast, he's got Guahir, and he's got 2 eagles. At the same time, that is a pretty good anti-cavalry army in a lot of ways. He's got the mobility, you know, he's got the mobility on me. He has got, you know, obviously he can fly, so he can do that. He has got hurl, which is going to be really nasty if he can get that off. He's also got Radagast with Panic Steed on his sleigh as well, so negating your charge bonuses. You know, so I wasn't confident going into that game. I have to say, even though domination, you know, should be strong for me, I was kind of looking at it and thinking, Joe's a really good player. He's probably not going to make many mistakes, so this could be a really tough game for me. So so we actually got deployed again. It was on a board that had not Osgiliath ruin pieces, but some like some big other ruins that you could actually sort of move up and down, and you had 4 of these around. And of course his goal was to sort of deploy the objective markers that he had in a way that he could access them always kind of from the middle, and I deployed the 2 that I did sort of inside these kind of rubbly bits of ruins that would be a bit harder for him to get to, but he probably still could be within 3 inches on the edges, to be honest. So we started off with setting up, and I had to, I believe I had to deploy my first warband. Yes, that's right, so I had to deploy my first warband, and I rolled, and it was Eowyn's warband. And I rolled, and I had to deploy in the first 12 inches. So immediately you're thinking, ooh, you know, that's not necessarily ideal. So I deployed her and her warband in the middle, quite far back, leaving enough of a gap on my left side to be able to anchor a flank, because of course hurl is what you're worried about, to anchor a flank against the ruin. So she went there, and then he deployed Guahir, I believe, next. I think it was Guahir. So Guahir then came next, and Guahir deployed probably about 12 inches from the centre. So I was looking at it and thinking, right, okay, so this is so what's probably going to happen is he'll be within range to sort of move, do a spell, and move back. You know, and I'm at the middle here, so I'm probably just going to have to, you know, I don't know, I'm going to have to kind of move back and do a bit of shooting. And you know, you're probably in a position as the cavalry player in that situation, because of the Panic Steed and the threat of the channeled Panic Steed and the eagles and all the hurl. You're probably in a position where you're likely to be a bit more defensive. And then he deployed his next warband. So then I deployed my next one and anchored that. I put Erkenbrand and his sons sort of round there, and I had all my outriders kind of scattered around the back, ready to run back to the 2 objectives, and then hope to kind of get in and jump in on that middle one, and maybe towards the end of the game. And then he deployed Radagast probably about 6 inches from the centre, slightly out from the ruin on his right flank, and then his eagles just over 10 inches away from my 2 warbands that are deployed. So they were, in fact, just over 12 inches away, I think, actually, because I think he wanted to avoid being charged by the Sons of Ale there. But I then still had 1 warband, and I was looking at it, and I think that you would probably have looked at me if you were the opponent, or even if I was on the other side of the table, you'd probably look at it and say, right, well, there was on the opposite side of the ruin to go around there, maybe to try and come round. But I was looking and I thought, that's a really gutsy move by him, because if I deploy in his face, this is going to come down to a bit of a roll off in that situation. And I actually thought this is probably more of the game that I want to play, because of the amount of might that I've got. You know, you've got 3 there with Ale, and you've got 2 with Eowyn and 3 with Erkenbrand, and Eowyn and Erkenbrand are going to be able to be in the middle within turn 1. To get their might into play, whereas he's only got 4 might. So although it could be gutsy from me as well, I then fancied my chances and thought that that was a bit of a mistake on his part, maybe to be as aggressive. I thought that maybe he'd set up sort of in that 6-inch point where Gwahir was and be able to move up, do spells, move back, and kind of force me to try and get to him, keep Eagles in front of Radagast, and force me to just try and shoot the game out. Because the longer the game goes on, I'm not going to kill everything through shooting in that time frame, not with Strength 2 bows. As time goes on, he's got a small all-hero army. It probably benefits him for that game to be drawn out and be that kind of game. So I then deployed my Sons of Ale, well, Ale the Young, I deployed in kind of an anti-fell beastie kind of formation, so that the Eagles, if he did want to win the roll-off, wouldn't be able to jump in and come over and stop his heroic. So I put my Sons of Ale and Riders around there, but I put all my Riders in range of his Eagles, and I put my Sons of Ale and Ale able to charge Radagast without actually being able to be charged back. So pretty gutsy, and I made sure everything was within 3 inches of Ale as well, just in case you do get that panic steed, channel panic steed. So yeah, that was that, and then I got priority, which meant that he then of course had to call the heroic, which I countered, which I got for free again. Fantastic start from Ale. Came to the roll off, and it went to me. Absolutely key when you're a cavalry player. And at that point, you know, the courage, of course, with Verkenbrand, that played a massive part, because I got all of my charges off. I mean, Ale and 2 Sons of Ale went in on Radagast on Slay, and then I kind of positioned 1 Son of Ale in a way that he was kind of on almost like the apex of the Eagle that was closer to the centre, so that he couldn't be hurled into Ale the Young or the 2, even though I had priority, so I would choose the combats. He couldn't be hurled back into Ale the Young and the 2 Sons of Ale, but likewise he couldn't be hurled against the other cavalry that were playing against, that charged in on the other Eagle. So so yeah, that's what I did there. And then moved the rest of my stuff up, but outside of range of Gwahir, and Gwahir couldn't get into combat with anything. I kept everything sort of outside the 12 inches. It was at that point I thought, you know, I was looking, and I was quite grateful that I didn't have to kind of waste a rider to sit behind Ale the Young and the 2 Sons of Ale to stop Gwahir from being able to sort of fly over. I think if he'd have moved, if Gwahir had been another Gwahir base or another 60 mil sort of towards the centre, he would have countered that threat and forced me to have another rider. You know, lots of players probably wouldn't have even thought to put a rider behind necessarily. You know, he probably would have caught someone out, but he hadn't done that. So Gwahir was then pretty useless and kind of moved into the middle, and then I moved everybody up to sort of within range. Then I didn't win very well. We obviously both heroic struck up. I chose the combats, of course. We heroic struck. Ale was 1 higher, so I managed to get Radagast down to 1 wound, no fate, with the Sons of Ale who piercing struck, of course, and Ale the Young. And I also managed to win in one of the combats versus one of the Eagles and take it down to 1 wound, so that was good. And then in the final combat with the Eagle, that Eagle won. I managed to hurl the rider through 2 riders, killed the rider I think, and dismounted, killed 2 of the riders I think actually, and dismounted one of them, I believe, from memory. But the riders had done their job really, which was to pin down that Eagle. So again, it was going to come down to that heroic move off. I called a heroic, he called the heroic. I won the roll off. I got the point of might for free, I believe, again, which was great. So I basically was getting the heroic moves for free and then paying for the heroic strikes in the turn, which was good. But because I got that, that meant I was able to pin down Gwahir as well, which then freed my heroes to really kind of press in and get on the Eagle. And I kept everything away from a potential heroic combat with Gwahir, and also the hurl threat of Gwahir, which was likely going to be about 9 inches. So kept everything away from that. And the reason for that, of course, I mean, I didn't think that he would heroic combat, because of course at this point he's kind of out of might, because he's done heroic move, 2 heroic strikes with Radagast, and I thought he'd want that might, of course, to get the priority next turn, which he did. He didn't do a heroic combat, but I hadn't left him any options to sort of jump onto anything anyway. And again, I won the heroic strike off. Radagast got taken down. One of the eagles got taken down straight away, and then the other eagle got taken down. And on that second turn, I think it was the second turn, it might have been the third turn, that the next eagle got taken down, I think. I can't remember. No, I think it might have been the second turn. I think it was the second turn, because I think Erkenbrand and Eowyn took down the final eagle to 25% him, and at this point I had the two objectives at the back. I had the objective in the middle, and I of course had broken him. I hadn't taken down his leader because Gwahil was his leader, and I'd started to make my way up and dismounted some things to get into the ruins where his bits and pieces were, sorry, the objective was in his corner, but didn't quite get there. And it meant that it was a victory for me, which meant that I had won my first ever singles event, and with all-mounted Rohan as well, my first love. So I was absolutely chuffed, especially sort of playing in a final game against a player as good as Joe. You know, he's a really good player, and probably, you know, probably a mistake in retrospect. I see what he was trying to do. It was a gutsy move. He probably didn't expect me to then be gutsy in return and go for it, and go for sort of that whole sort of not all or nothing, because I was banking on the fact that I had more might. So if I forced him to have to use that might early, which he would have to do, then ultimately I was going to end up getting the heroic moves and priorities he wouldn't be able to counter, and I would get to do what I wanted to do. So probably a mistake in retrospect from him, but a good victory nonetheless, and that meant 4 wins, which meant that the all-mounted Rohan led me to my first ever singles tournament victory. So although it might be not GBHL League counting, I was pretty chuffed with that, with 13 players there. Like really chuffed, and yeah, absolutely a good way of encouraging me to come back. But you know, as I thought, I mean, let's face it, my Rohirrim, all-mounted Rohirrim, it's an army that I know how to use. Let's not beat around the bush. I'm pretty good with a cavalry army, and you don't see that many all cavalry armies really. So it can be something, if you've not played against it, that's very difficult to counter unless you've got the tools, or you're playing at points where you've got the tools to do that. And also, it is an optimised all-mounted Rohan list. This is not Theoden. It's not Theoden Gamling, you know, with Merry chucked in there and Hammer or something like that. Let's face it, Erkenbrand is very good. He's very good. Eowyn's good for a point, good 2 points of might. And yeah, even if I had Aemir in there, Marshal of Riddermark, you could then say that that is more, you know, less of a sort of optimised build. But you know, it's still a pretty good build. You know, six Sons of Ale, 10. You got 13 bow shots as well, 10 Westfold Red Shield. It is an optimised all-mounted Rohan army. Is it a competitive tournament army? I think possibly at 500 points with the right scenarios. I think it is. So in that respect, it was probably one of the more competitive armies that was there, and I know how to use it. But nonetheless, I was very pleased to win that. So I would like to give a massive shout out to every single person that I played. All of my opponents were wonderful, really good guys. Really nice to see some armies on all the boards that were cool. There wasn't an army there that I was thinking I would not sort of enjoy playing this. Even the Mummock, you know what I mean? It's cool. It's cool to see something like that you wouldn't normally see, and that really kind of paints a great picture of what that tournament was like. You know, a really good picture. So I'd hugely recommend, you know, if you've got of course I'm a huge supporter of the Great British Hobbit League. Absolutely am. But I think it's wonderful that we hopefully will continue to see an emergence of these kind of smaller local gaming groups, which will, you know, and events and tournaments which don't necessarily need to count for the league. You know, that's not what it's all about. But just get groups of people together, playing the game that they love, having a bit of an incentive, but not enough so that you go there to try and cheese it or power game it or anything like that. It was a wonderful atmosphere, a lovely location to play. The boards were fine. I think that pushed Joe Wilcock back to 3rd place, so so his only defeat came against me, as did Ben Haskell, who came 2nd. His only defeat was against me, so I was pretty chuffed with that as well, in terms of the my own strength of schedule of who I'd played, and I believe that the Hunter Rourke army came either 4th or 5th actually, which isn't bad either. I think he drew his last game, but only because he was about to win his last game. So again, that would have been a situation where he definitely would have been 4th if he hadn't chucked his leader in and taken a wound. So it was a good group of people, and I would definitely make the journey down to Chester, not just for a tournament like that or a GBHL tournament, but I would head down there just to play with that group of players. So well done to the group down there in Chester, and a massive well done to Gethin. It was nice to go up, and my prize, I believe the 3rd prize was the Philharmonic Orchestra CD of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, which I think is a nice little prize. 2nd prize was a parchment Middle-earth map, which I was gutted wasn't 1st prize, because I would have taken that. But 1st prize was a Final Fate of the Witch King. Now I do have Final Fate of the Witch King, so what I decided to do was to give that to the player who had the wooden spoon. Hopefully to encourage him, obviously, to keep it up and to keep having fun. So I gave him that, and I've asked Gethin in return. I've said, in my dungeon here, I do have various certificates up for 3rd places and 2nd places and quiz winners and doubles winners and all that kind of stuff. Best sportsman, best painted, and if he can send me a little certificate that I can print out and pop up on the wall, I will do, because I am proud of finally taking a win. So great event. I'm looking forward to it next year. I hope I can help Gethin in any possible way, and I hugely recommend you guys go and try and support not just Gethin, but any tournament which is local in particular. And by local, I do mean an hour to an hour and a half drive. You might think, well, that's not local, but it is when it comes to strategy battle gaming. So if you do get a chance to support your local tournaments and events, make sure you do, whether that is down at the East Anglia Hobbit League, who also had a local gaming gathering and event on the same day, or something like this at Chester. So a big round of applause to those guys for making it a really wonderful experience for myself. So yeah, first tournament win for the All Mountain Rohan, 1st singles tournament win for myself, and very much looking forward to continuing the repaint. Maybe bring them again to another 500-point event next year. So thanks for watching this tournament review. Just over an hour's worth of footage there for you. For those of you that are wondering what happened to Speak Friend and Question, I did film an epic Speak Friend and Question with a couple of very special guests, which unfortunately I cannot post up in its entirety. So as such, it is going to be a big editing job, which I have started in order to make it publishable. And I will hopefully try and get that published by the end of the month. So you'll only have one Speak Friend and Question this month, which is a shame, but at the same time it should still make for a good one, and we'll bring that back going into December. So guys, don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Support your Hobbit host like myself by checking out the links in the video description below. Make sure that you also check out our Facebook page and our Twitter and follow us on there. Support your Hobbit hobby, and happy strategy battle gaming.